Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Now, let's begin. Helen Moore stood at the front of her classroom, chalk dust settling on her worn cardigan like fresh snow. 68 years old, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, she'd been teaching first grade for 40 years in this same building in rural Ohio. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The school district couldn't afford to replace them. She didn't complain. She never did. "All right, children," Helen said softly, her voice still warm despite the exhaustion that lived in her bones. "Please take out your reading books." 23 small faces looked up at her. 23 futures she'd guide for one more year before retirement finally came. Among them sat Emily Carter, a pale 6-year-old with tangled blonde hair and eyes that seemed too old for her face. The girl rarely spoke, rarely smiled, and always clutched her backpack like it held something precious. Helen had learned not to push too hard with quiet children. They opened up when they felt safe. As the students shuffled through their desks, Emily reached for her bag. Her small hands trembled. Helen noticed but didn't understand why. Then it happened. The zipper caught. Emily pulled harder. The entire backpack tumbled from the desk, contents spilling across the floor. Pencils rolled. Crayons scattered. And there, among the innocent debris of childhood, lay something that didn't belong. A glossy magazine, adult fashion, a woman on the cover in revealing clothing, posed suggestively. Helen's breath caught. Before she could move, Emily dropped to her knees with a desperate cry. "Don't throw it away!" The girl's voice cracked with panic, tears already forming. "It's my mommy. They hid it from my daddy." The classroom went silent. 22 children stared. Helen froze, the magazine now in her trembling hand, looking down at Emily's anguished face. "Please, Miss Moore," Emily whispered, reaching for it. "It's all I have of her." Helen's heart hammered against her ribs. In 4 decades of teaching, she'd seen neglect, poverty, and hardship. But something about this moment felt different, dangerous, urgent. She knelt down slowly, her knees protesting, and met Emily's eyes. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about this." "She's famous now," Emily said quickly, desperately, as if the explanation would make everything normal. "Grandma says she's far away doing important things, but I know she'll come back." Helen looked at the magazine again. The woman was beautiful, yes, but there was something haunting in the photograph. Something wrong that Helen couldn't yet name. What kind of mother leaves a 6-year-old with only this to remember her by? And why would a child believe this was something to be proud of? Helen waited until the other children filed out for recess before gently touching Emily's shoulder. "Stay with me for a minute, sweetheart." The little girl's eyes widened with fear. "Am I in trouble?" "No, honey, not at all." Helen pulled 2 chairs together near the window, where autumn sunlight struggled through dirty glass. "I just want to understand. Can you tell me about your mommy?" Emily's face transformed. The fear melted into something that broke Helen's heart. Desperate hope. "She's beautiful, isn't she? Grandma says she had to go away for work, important work, like a model or an actress." Helen chose her words carefully. "When did she go away?" "I was little, maybe 4. Emily swung her legs, not quite reaching the floor. "Daddy got really sad after. He cried a lot. Then he went away too." She said it so matter-of-factly, as if parents disappearing was normal. "And you live with your grandmother now?" "Grandma Doris. She's tired a lot." Emily traced patterns on the magazine cover, her finger following the outline of the woman's face. "She doesn't like talking about mommy. She hid all the pictures, but I found this in a box in the basement. Grandma doesn't know I have it." Helen's teacher instinct screamed that something was deeply wrong, but she couldn't push too hard. "Not yet." "Does your grandmother take good care of you?" "She tries." Emily's voice got smaller. "But sometimes she forgets to make dinner, and she cries when she thinks I'm sleeping. I hear her through the wall saying she can't do this anymore." The words landed like stones in Helen's chest. That afternoon, Helen sat in her small kitchen feeding spoonfuls of applesauce to Richard, her ex-husband. He didn't recognize her today. Dementia had stolen the man she'd once loved, leaving behind a shell that needed constant care. They'd divorced 10 years ago when his illness began, but she'd never stopped being his caregiver. There was no one else. "Open up, Richard," she coaxed gently. He turned his head away like a stubborn child. Helen's body ached. Her hands trembled from fatigue. She'd been awake since 5, had taught all day, and now faced an evening of medications, meals, and monitoring. Tomorrow would be the same, and the next day, until retirement came in June. But Emily's face kept appearing in her mind, those haunted eyes, that desperate grip on a magazine that represented a mother who'd vanished. After Richard finally fell asleep, Helen pulled out Emily's school file from her bag. She wasn't supposed to take files home, but she had to know more. Emily Carter, age 6, lives with grandmother, Doris Carter, 523 Maple Street. Mother, Jennifer Carter, whereabouts unknown. Father, Marcus Carter, unavailable. No emergency contacts beyond Doris. No recent parent-teacher conferences. No calls returned. Helen picked up her phone 3 times before finally dialing the number listed. It rang, and rang, and rang. No answer. No voicemail. She tried again an hour later. Nothing. As Helen lay in bed that night, listening to Richard's labored breathing through the baby monitor, she made a decision. Tomorrow, she'd find Doris Carter herself. Because in 40 years of teaching, Helen had learned to recognize the signs when a child was slipping through the cracks, and Emily was falling fast. The next morning, Helen arrived at school an hour early. Her joints protested the cold November air as she climbed the steps to the administrative office. Mrs. Palmer, the principal, was already at her desk, surrounded by budget reports and coffee cups. "Helen, you're here early." Mrs. Palmer didn't look up from her computer. "I need to discuss one of my students, Emily Carter." "What about her?" Helen explained carefully, leaving out the magazine but mentioning Emily's anxiety, her comments about her grandmother's struggles, the absent parents. "I'm concerned about her home situation. I've tried calling the grandmother multiple times with no response." Mrs. Palmer finally looked up, her expression weary. "Helen, I appreciate your dedication, truly, but we have 300 students in this building. Unless there's a specific incident, something reportable, we can't investigate every family situation. The grandmother has custody. That's all that matters legally. But the child is clearly struggling. Half our students are struggling." Mrs. Palmer interrupted, not unkindly. "We are underfunded, understaffed, and overwhelmed. Unless you have evidence of immediate danger, my hands are tied. Keep an eye on her in class, but don't overstep. We can't afford legal complications." Helen left the office feeling hollow. During recess, she watched Emily from the classroom window. The little girl sat alone on a bench, her backpack clutched against her chest, while other children played. She rocked slightly, back and forth, lost in her own world. Helen's phone buzzed. The home care nurse, Richard, had a difficult night. Aggressive this morning. May need doctor visit. The weight of everything pressed down on Helen's shoulders. She was 68, exhausted and barely keeping her own life together. What made her think she could help Emily? But then Emily looked toward the window and waved, a small, hesitant gesture. Helen waved back and the child smiled. Just for a second. At 3:15, Helen positioned herself near the school entrance, watching as parents and guardians collected their children. She waited and waited. Finally, at 3:45, an old sedan pulled up. A woman emerged, mid-60s, gray hair and a messy ponytail, wearing a stained coat that had seen better years. Doris Carter moved slowly, as if every step hurt. Helen approached quickly. "Mrs. Carter, I'm Miss Moore, Emily's teacher." Doris turned, and Helen saw eyes that mirrored her granddaughter's, exhausted and haunted. "Is something wrong?" "I'd like to schedule a conference. There are some concerns." "What kind of concerns?" Doris's voice sharpened defensively. "Emily seems anxious lately. I found something in her backpack yesterday that's none of your business." Doris cut her off, her face flushing. "You teachers think you know everything about our lives. You don't know anything. Mrs. Carter, I'm only trying to help." "We don't need your help." Doris grabbed Emily's hand roughly. The little girl flinched. "Come on, Emily, we're leaving." As they walked toward the car, Emily looked back at Helen with an expression that would haunt her dreams. Part apology, part plea. Helen stood in the cold parking lot long after they drove away. That evening, while preparing Richard's dinner, Helen couldn't shake the encounter. Doris wasn't angry. She was terrified. and people only acted that defensive when they were hiding something. What secret was Doris Carter protecting? And how much danger was Emily really in? Helen couldn't sleep. At 2 in the morning, she sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold, staring at Emily's school file. Richard's snoring echoed from the bedroom. At least tonight he was peaceful. She thought about Doris Carter's eyes. That wasn't just exhaustion or irritation. That was fear. By 6 a.m., Helen had made a decision. After settling Richard with his breakfast and the morning nurse, she drove to the Riverside Public Library. It opened at 9, and she was waiting at the doors. Sharon Mills, the head librarian, greeted her with surprise. Helen Moore, on a Saturday? This must be important. They'd known each other for 30 years. Sharon had helped Helen through her divorce, through Richard's diagnosis, through countless difficult seasons. If anyone could help her now, it was Sharon. "I need to research someone," Helen said quietly, "and I need discretion." In a private study room, Sharon pulled up the library's database and local newspaper archives. "What's the name?" "Jennifer Carter. She'd be late 20s now, from this area." Sharon's fingers flew across the keyboard. Minutes passed. Then her face changed. "Oh, Helen." She turned the monitor. There, dated 18 months ago, was a headline from the Ohio Valley Tribune. "Local woman arrested in connection with exploitation network." Helen's hands went numb as she read. Jennifer Carter, 28 of Riverside, was arrested Friday following a multi-agency investigation into an organized ring involved in substance distribution and the production of inappropriate material. Carter faces multiple charges, including... The article included a booking photo. Same blonde hair as the magazine cover. Same facial features. But this woman looked broken. Dark circles, hollow cheeks, empty eyes. "There's more," Sharon said softly, clicking to another article from 2 months later. Husband hospitalized following wife's arrest. Marcus Carter, 32, was admitted to Riverside Mental Health Facility after a reported breakdown. The couple's daughter, age 5, is currently in the care of maternal grandmother Doris Carter. Family Services confirms the child is in a stable placement. Helen's vision blurred. Emily doesn't know. She thinks her mother is famous. She's carrying around that magazine like it's proof her mother is successful. "The grandmother must have hidden everything," Sharon whispered. "Probably tried to protect her. But at what cost?" Helen looked at the screen again. "Where's Jennifer now?" Sharon searched deeper. "Sentenced to 2 years. With the rehabilitation program. She might already be out, but there'd be restrictions. Court orders about contact with the child." Helen's mind spun. Emily was living in a house built on lies. Doris was drowning under the weight of shame and responsibility. Marcus was institutionalized. And Jennifer, whatever she'd done, was somewhere in the system. "What are you going to do?" Sharon asked carefully. "I don't know yet." Helen stood, her legs unsteady. "But I can't pretend I don't know this." Driving home, Helen gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles went white. How do you tell a 6-year-old that her mother isn't a glamorous model but someone who made terrible choices? How do you shatter a child's only source of hope? And worse, was it even Helen's place to do anything at all? That afternoon, while Richard napped, Helen sat at her desk and did something she rarely did. She prayed, not for answers necessarily, but for wisdom, for courage, for the strength to do what was right, even if she didn't know what that was yet. When she opened her eyes, her phone was ringing. The caller ID showed an unknown number. "Hello? Miss Moore?" The voice was young, shaky. "This is Emily. I'm calling from Grandma's phone. She's asleep." A pause. "Can you come over? I'm scared." Helen's heart hammered. "Emily, sweetheart, what's wrong? Are you hurt?" "No, but Grandma won't wake up. I shook her and she just keeps sleeping." Helen was already grabbing her keys. "I'm coming right now. Stay on the phone with me. Is your grandmother breathing?" "I think so. Her chest is moving." "Good, that's good." Helen rushed to Richard's room. The nurse was still there, thank God. She quickly explained the emergency. "Can you stay an extra hour?" "Of course, Helen, go." Helen broke speed limits driving to Maple Street. Emily stayed on the line, her small voice a lifeline. "I'm scared, Miss Moore. Grandma never sleeps this long. You did the right thing calling me. I'm almost there." The house was a small ranch with peeling paint and an overgrown yard. Helen found the door unlocked. Inside, the air was stale and cold. the heat barely working. Emily stood in the hallway, still in her pajamas, though it was past 2 p.m. Helen knelt and hugged her. "Show me where your grandmother is." Doris lay on the couch, fully clothed, an empty prescription bottle on the coffee table beside her. Helen's nursing instincts, learned from years of caring for Richard, kicked in. She checked Doris's pulse. Steady but slow. She looked at the bottle. Sleep medication. Not empty, just mostly used. Doris stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "What? Who?" "Mrs. Carter, it's Helen Moore. Emily called me. She was worried." Doris sat up slowly, disoriented. When she saw Emily, shame flooded her face. "Baby, I'm sorry. I just needed to rest. I took my medicine and She trailed off, seeing Helen's expression. "How many did you take?" Helen asked quietly. "Just 2, maybe 3. I can't remember." Doris's voice cracked. "I was so tired of everything." Helen made coffee while Emily sat close to her grandmother. The child was silent but watchful, used to being the adult in crisis. Once Doris was more alert, Helen sent Emily to play in her room. Then she sat across from the exhausted woman. "Talk to me," Helen said simply. And Doris broke. "I'm 63 years old. I raised Jennifer. I did everything right, or I thought I did. Then she got involved with the wrong people, made terrible choices, destroyed her family." Tears streamed down Doris's weathered face. "Marcus couldn't handle it. He fell apart. They put him away. And suddenly I have Emily, a 6-year-old, on my social security, in this falling apart house. And I'm so tired, Miss Moore. So tired. Have you asked for help? Social services? Family? There's no family. And social services?" Doris laughed bitterly. "They'd take her away, put her in foster care. I won't let that happen. But I also don't know how much longer I can do this." Helen's chest tightened. "Emily deserves stability. She deserves the truth too. She thinks her mother is famous." "I know." Doris wiped her eyes. "But how do I tell her the truth? That her mother is a criminal? That her father abandoned her? At least the lie gives her hope. Hope built on lies crumbles eventually," Helen said gently. They sat in silence. Finally, Doris spoke. "What do you want from me, Miss Moore?" "I want to help. Let me try." "Why? You don't even know us." Helen thought of 40 years in classrooms, of all the children she'd tried to save but couldn't, of retirement looming and a life that felt increasingly meaningless beyond just surviving. "Because Emily needs someone, and maybe I need to do this." Doris studied her. "You're as worn out as I am." "Yes, but I'm not ready to give up yet." Before Helen left, Emily appeared with a drawing, a picture of Helen, herself, and a rainbow. "This is for you, Miss Moore, for coming when I was scared." Helen taped it to her refrigerator that night, next to Richard's medication schedule. It was the first splash of color in her house in years. Over the next 2 weeks, Helen's world quietly expanded to include Emily in ways she hadn't anticipated. She started calling Doris each evening, just to check in. Sometimes Doris answered with relief in her voice. Sometimes she didn't answer at all, and Helen would lie awake worrying. At school, Emily began staying after class to help Helen clean erasers and organize books. The girl talked more now, small stories about a cat she wished she had, about learning to tie her shoes, about dreams where her mother came home. Helen never mentioned what she'd learned at the library. Not yet. But carrying the secret felt like swallowing stones. Each time Emily said, "When Mommy comes back," Helen's heart fractured a little more. One Friday, as they walked to the parking lot together, Emily asked, "Miss Moore, do you have children?" "No, sweetheart. I never did." "Why not?" Helen paused. How to explain a life spent teaching other people's children while her own marriage crumbled under the weight of Richard's illness. Sometimes life takes us down different paths than we expected. "Do you get lonely?" The question, so innocent and direct, nearly broke her. "Sometimes, yes." Emily slipped her small hand into Helen's. "Me too." They stood there in the cold parking lot, two lonely souls finding unexpected comfort. That weekend, Helen made a decision. She called Sharon. "I need contact information for a good social worker, someone who actually cares. I know someone. Linda Reeves. Retired now, but she does consulting. Want her number?" Helen met Linda at a coffee shop Monday morning. Linda was 60, sharp-eyed, with gray hair and a practical cut. She listened without interrupting as Helen explained everything. "You're getting attached," Linda observed. "I know. That complicates things legally, emotionally. You understand that?" "I do." Linda sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "The grandmother is overwhelmed. The child is in limbo. These cases slip through cracks every single day." She met Helen's eyes. "What exactly do you want to happen here?" Helen surprised herself with the answer. "I want to make sure Emily doesn't disappear into the system. I want her to have a chance." "And what about you? You're almost 70, caring for an ex-husband with dementia, taking on a traumatized child." "I know it sounds impossible." "It doesn't sound impossible," Linda interrupted gently. "It sounds like someone who still has something to give. But you need to be realistic about what you can actually do, and prepared for how hard this might get." Helen thought of Emily's drawing on her refrigerator, of the way the girl's face lit up when Helen praised her reading, of 40 years of teaching where she'd never been able to truly save anyone. "I'm prepared," Helen said, though she wasn't sure she was. Helen began implementing small changes. She created a special reading corner in her classroom with cushions and soft lighting. Emily gravitated to it during free time, often falling asleep there, a sign she wasn't sleeping well at home. Helen brought extra snacks. Noticing Emily's lunch was often just crackers, she stayed late, giving Emily quiet attention the girl clearly craved. But on Thursday, Mrs. Palmer called her into the office. "Helen, I've received complaints from other parents. They say you're showing favoritism to Emily Carter." The principal's tone was apologetic but firm. "You're giving her special treatment, extra time, special privileges. She needs extra support. They all need support. We can't give one child everything while others get nothing." Mrs. Palmer leaned forward. "I know your heart is in the right place, but you're a teacher, not a social worker. You need to maintain professional boundaries." Helen felt the reprimand like a slap. "So I should just ignore?" "I'm not saying ignore. I'm saying be careful, be fair, and don't get so involved that you can't see clearly anymore." Helen left the office humiliated and angry. 40 years of service, and now she was being told she cared too much. That evening, everything fell apart. Helen arrived home to find an ambulance in her driveway. Richard had collapsed. Severe dehydration. The nurse explained through tears, "I'm so sorry, Helen. He refused water all day. I tried, but he was combative." At the hospital, a doctor pulled Helen aside. "Mrs. Moore, your ex-husband's condition is deteriorating faster than expected. He needs more intensive care than you can provide at home. We need to discuss assisted living facilities." Helen sat in the sterile waiting room, head in her hands. She'd been so focused on Emily that she'd neglected Richard. The guilt was crushing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Doris. "Emily asking for you. Says you haven't smiled at her in days. Is everything okay?" Helen stared at the message. She was failing everyone. Richard, Emily, herself. When she finally got home at midnight, Richard stabilized, but staying overnight for observation, Helen stood in her dark kitchen. Emily's drawing hung on the refrigerator, rainbow bright against the white door. She thought about Mrs. Palmer's warning, about professional boundaries, about not being able to save everyone. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe she was a foolish old woman trying to be something she couldn't be. Helen reached for the drawing, ready to take it down, but her hand stopped. She thought of Emily's voice on the phone. "I'm scared." She thought of Doris's exhausted tears, of a little girl who believed her mother was famous because the truth was too painful. Helen left the drawing where it was. She wasn't giving up. Not yet. Richard came home after 3 days, weaker and more confused. The hospital strongly recommended a memory care facility, but Helen couldn't afford it. Not yet. Medicare would cover some, but the waiting lists were 6 months long. She arranged for increased nursing visits, 4 times a week now instead of 2. It drained her savings, but there was no choice. At school, Helen pulled back from Emily as instructed. No more special reading corner time. No extra snacks. Professional distance. Emily noticed immediately. "Did I do something wrong, Miss Moore?" the girl asked after class one day, her voice small. "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. Then why don't you talk to me anymore?" Helen's heart shattered, but she maintained composure. "I talk to all my students equally, Emily. That's my job." The light went out of Emily's eyes. She nodded and walked away, backpack clutched tight. That week, Emily missed 3 days of school. When Helen called Doris, there was no answer. On Friday, Emily returned, but she was different, more withdrawn than ever. During recess, Helen watched from the window as Emily sat alone, rocking slightly, talking to herself. After school, Helen approached Doris's car. "Is everything all right?" Emily missed several days. "She had a cold," Doris said curtly, but Helen saw the lie in her eyes. "Mrs. Carter, I told you we don't need your help." Doris's voice cracked. "Please, just leave us alone." As they drove away, Helen noticed something. A for sale sign in Doris's hand, not yet posted. That evening, Helen's phone rang. Unknown number. "Helen Moore." "Yes, this is Linda Reeves, the social worker. We met 2 weeks ago." "I remember. I did some checking into the Carter case, quietly." Linda's voice was grave. "Jennifer Carter was released from prison 3 months ago. She's in a halfway house in Columbus, completing a rehabilitation program." Helen's breath caught. "There's more. Doris applied to relinquish guardianship. The paperwork was filed last week. She's planning to surrender Emily to the state after Christmas." The words hit like a physical blow. She can, and she's going to. She's selling the house, moving to Florida to live with a sister. Emily will enter foster care in January. Helen sank into a chair. "Does Emily know?" "I doubt it. Doris is probably waiting until the last moment." Linda paused. "Helen, if you want to do something about this, you have maybe 6 weeks. After that, Emily disappears into a system that's already overwhelmed." After hanging up, Helen sat in the dark. Richard slept fitfully in the next room. Her body ached with exhaustion. Her savings were nearly gone. She was 68 years old and barely holding her own life together. What could she possibly do? Emily's drawing caught her eye again, the rainbow bright and hopeful. Helen made a decision. She called Linda back. "What would it take for me to become Emily's guardian?" Linda was silent for a long moment. "Helen, do you understand what you're asking? Tell me what it would take. You'd need to prove stable housing, financial capability, and physical capacity to care for a child. At your age, with a dependent ex-husband, the court will scrutinize everything. But it's possible. Possible, yes. Likely. That's different." Linda's voice softened. "But if you're serious, we start with emergency temporary guardianship. We'd need Doris's cooperation, medical clearances, home inspections, background checks, and we'd need to move fast." "Then let's move fast." Over the next week, Helen became a woman on a mission. She met with her doctor, obtained health clearances. She contacted a lawyer, a former student who offered pro bono help. She organized her finances, showing enough savings for a year of expenses. She increased Richard's nursing care to daily visits, documenting that he had adequate supervision, and she prepared her home. The spare bedroom used for storage was cleaned out. She bought a small bed, painted the walls a soft yellow, hung cheerful curtains. At school, Helen couldn't tell Emily what she was planning, not yet, but she found small ways to reconnect: a smile during reading time, a gentle touch on the shoulder, a whispered, "You're doing great, sweetheart." Emily responded like a flower to sunlight. One afternoon, they sat together during lunch. Emily opened her battered lunchbox, crackers again, and a bruised apple. Helen slid half her sandwich across the table. "Trade you?" Emily's eyes lit up. "Really? Really?" As they ate together, Emily said quietly, "I heard Grandma on the phone. She said something about me going away after Christmas. Do you know what that means?" Helen's throat tightened. She couldn't lie, but she couldn't tell the full truth either. Sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions about what's best. "But I don't want to go away. I want to stay here, with you, and Grandma, and my school." "I know, sweetheart. Can you make me stay?" Helen took the girl's small hand. "I'm going to try. I promise you, I'm going to try." That weekend, Linda arranged a meeting with Doris. Helen drove to the small house, her heart pounding. Doris answered the door, surprised. "Miss Moore, may I come in? I have something important to discuss." Over coffee at the worn kitchen table, Helen laid out her proposal. "I want to apply for temporary guardianship of Emily, not to take her away from you permanently, but to give you time to get back on your feet, to give Emily stability." Doris stared. You'd do that? Take on a 6-year-old at your age? I would. Why? Helen thought of all the children she'd taught, all the ones she couldn't help. Because she needs someone, and because I can. Tears filled Doris's eyes. I'm failing her, I know I am. But giving her to a stranger, I'm not a stranger. I'm her teacher, and I care about her deeply. Doris was quiet for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "What would this look like?" And for the first time in weeks, Helen felt hope. Linda returned with news that changed everything. She arrived at Helen's house on a gray November afternoon, her expression unreadable. Helen led her to the kitchen where Richard sat staring out the window, lost in his own world. "I've been digging deeper into Jennifer Carter's case," Linda began, "and there's something you need to know." Helen braced herself. Jennifer was released from prison 4 months ago. She completed an intensive rehabilitation program, substance counseling, job training, therapy. She's been clean since her arrest. That's good, isn't it? Yes, but there's more. Linda pulled out a folder. She's been trying to contact Emily. Multiple letters sent to Doris's address, phone calls, all blocked by Doris. Helen's stomach dropped. Doris never told me. There's a restraining order, technically. Jennifer can't have direct contact until she completes psychological evaluations and proves sustained sobriety. But she's been following the rules. She's working 2 jobs, living in a supervised facility, attending support meetings. Linda met Helen's eyes. She's trying, Helen. Really trying. Does Emily know her mother is out? No, and that's the problem. Linda leaned forward. Doris is so consumed by shame and anger that she's punishing Jennifer by erasing her, but Emily deserves to know the truth. Helen felt the ground shifting beneath her. What are you saying? I'm saying your guardianship plan just got more complicated. If Jennifer continues her progress, she'll petition to regain custody. The court will likely favor reunification with a biological parent who's demonstrating rehabilitation. So I'd just be temporary? Possibly. But Emily needs stability now, while Jennifer rebuilds her life. And maybe, Linda paused carefully, maybe you could be the bridge, not replacing Jennifer, but giving Emily a safe place while her mother gets stronger. Helen sat back, processing. This wasn't what she'd imagined. She'd pictured raising Emily, becoming her guardian permanently. Now she was being asked to be a stepping stone. Would you still do it? Linda asked. Knowing you might have to let her go? Helen thought of Emily's face, her loneliness, her desperate need for someone to stay. Yes, Helen said quietly, because it's not about me, it's about what Emily needs. There's one more thing. Linda hesitated. I think you should meet Jennifer before we proceed. Helen's heart hammered. Meet her. She's requested it. She knows about your involvement with Emily. She wants to thank you. And honestly, I think you need to see who she really is. Not the booking photo or the mistakes, but the person trying to rebuild. 2 days later, Helen drove to Columbus. The halfway house was a converted duplex in a quiet neighborhood. Linda accompanied her for support. Jennifer Carter opened the door, thin, with tired eyes and nervous hands. She looked nothing like the glossy magazine cover Emily cherished. Miss Moore, Jennifer said softly. Thank you for coming. They sat in a small common room. Jennifer twisted a napkin in her lap. I know what you must think of me, she began. I don't presume to know your story, Helen replied honestly. Jennifer's eyes filled. I made terrible choices, got involved with people I shouldn't have, lost myself completely. Her voice cracked. I lost my daughter, my husband, everything. But you're trying to rebuild. Every single day. Jennifer looked up. Emily doesn't know me anymore. She was 4 when I left. I've missed 2 years of her life. 2 years I can never get back. Helen saw genuine anguish. I don't deserve her, Jennifer continued, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to become someone who does. Helen drove home in silence, Linda beside her. The meeting with Jennifer had shaken something loose inside her. Assumptions, judgments, certainties. What are you thinking? Linda asked. That people are more complicated than their worst moments, Helen said quietly. Over the next week, Helen worked with Linda to craft a plan. Not guardianship as replacement, but as transition. Helen would provide immediate stability. Jennifer would continue rehabilitation with supervised visits. Doris would be relieved of the burden crushing her. And Emily would have a safe harbor while her world slowly reorganized itself. The paperwork was daunting. Court petitions, medical evaluations, financial disclosures, home inspections. Helen filled out forms until her hand cramped. At school, Emily noticed Helen's distraction. "Are you okay, Miss Moore?" "I'm working on something important, sweetheart." "Is it about me?" Helen knelt to Emily's eye level. "Yes, it's about making sure you're safe and loved. Can you trust me?" Emily nodded solemnly. The home inspection came first. A social worker walked through Helen's small house, noting the updated bedroom, the safety measures, the accessible layout. She observed Richard, stable with his nurse present, and asked pointed questions about Helen's capacity to manage both. "Mrs. Moore, you understand this would be demanding? A 6-year-old requires constant attention. Your ex-husband requires significant care." "I've been a teacher for 40 years, Helen replied. "I know what children need, and I've arranged for adequate support for Richard. And if it becomes too much..." Helen met her gaze steadily. "Then I'll ask for help, but I won't give up." 2 weeks before Christmas, Linda arranged a meeting with everyone. Helen, Doris, Jennifer, and representatives from family services. Emily was at school, unaware. The tension in that small conference room was suffocating. Doris refused to look at Jennifer. "I can't believe you're allowing this. She destroyed our family." "I'm trying to rebuild it," Jennifer said quietly. "I know I can't undo what I did, but Emily is my daughter. You lost that right when you made your choices." "Mrs. Carter," Linda intervened calmly, "we're not here to rehash the past. We're here to plan Emily's future. What's best for her, not what feels fair to any of us." The plan emerged slowly. Helen would file for temporary emergency guardianship. Doris would consent, acknowledging she could no longer provide adequate care. Jennifer would continue her program with graduated supervised visits, first at the facility, then in neutral locations, eventually building toward unsupervised time. The goal: reunification within 12 to 18 months if Jennifer maintained progress. Doris signed the papers with shaking hands. "Take care of her," she whispered to Helen. "Better than I could. You did your best under impossible circumstances," Helen told her. "That matters." As they left, Jennifer stopped Helen. "I'll never be able to thank you enough for this." "Don't thank me yet. I'm not doing this for you, I'm doing it for Emily. And if you backslide, if you hurt that child again in any way..." "I won't," Jennifer interrupted firmly. "I swear on everything I have left I won't." Helen wanted to believe her. Time would tell. That evening, Helen prepared the yellow bedroom one final time. She hung the drawing Emily had made on the wall. She placed stuffed animals on the bed. She stocked the closet with warm clothes purchased from the thrift store. And she wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life, or the most important decision. The court hearing was scheduled for December 20th. Helen had 2 weeks to wait, 2 weeks of carrying a secret that felt like carrying fire. On Monday, December 8th, everything changed. Helen was cleaning up her classroom after dismissal when she heard voices in the hallway. Mrs. Palmer and Linda Reeves, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. "Filed emergency paperwork this morning. The grandmother is moving Friday. If we don't act now..." Helen stepped into the hallway. "What's happening?" Linda's face was grave. Doris accelerated her timeline. "She's leaving for Florida this Friday, not after Christmas. She's planning to drop Emily at family services on Thursday." "She can't. We have a plan." She's panicking. I think the reality of what's happening finally hit her. Linda pulled out her phone. "I've filed for emergency intervention, but it takes time. We might not get approval before Thursday." Helen felt ice in her veins. "Where's Emily?" "Still in school. She doesn't know yet. We have to tell her. We have to prepare her." "Helen? I don't think that's..." But Helen was already walking toward the office. She found Emily in the after-school program, coloring quietly while other children played. The girl looked up, and something in Helen's expression made her stop mid-stroke. "Miss Moore, what's wrong?" Helen knelt beside her. "Sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something important." That evening, Helen tried calling Doris repeatedly. No answer. She drove to Maple Street. The house was dark, boxes visible through the windows. She sat in her car, helpless and furious. How could Doris do this? After agreeing to the plan, after signing papers, after everything. At home, Richard was having a bad night. He didn't recognize the nurse and kept trying to leave the house. I need to go to work. I'm late. Where are my keys? Richard, please. Helen tried to guide him back to his chair. It's nighttime. You don't have work. Don't lie to me. He shoved her, not violently, but enough that she stumbled. The nurse helped steady her. Mrs. Moore, I think we need to call his doctor. His agitation is worse. Helen wanted to scream. Everything was falling apart at once. Wednesday morning, Emily didn't come to school. Helen's calls to Doris went straight to voicemail. At noon, Linda arrived at the school. I have news. The emergency petition was denied. The judge says the original hearing date stands, December 20th, but Doris is leaving Friday, and she's already dropped Emily at a temporary placement facility. What? Helen's vision blurred. Where? Riverside Children's Center. It's a holding facility for kids in transition. She'll stay there until the hearing. Helen grabbed her coat. I'm going there now. Helen, they won't let you see her. You're not family, not yet. I don't care. The Riverside Children's Center was a converted office building, sterile and institutional. Helen explained who she was, why she'd come. The receptionist was sympathetic but firm. I'm sorry. Only approved guardians can visit. You're not on the list. Then put me on the list. It doesn't work that way. Helen's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Miss Moore, it's Emily. I borrowed a phone. I'm scared. Please come get me. Helen showed the text to the receptionist. That child is terrified. I'm the closest thing to stability she has right now. Please. Something in Helen's voice must have broken through. The woman hesitated, then picked up her phone. Let me ask my supervisor. 20 minutes later, Helen sat in a small visitation room. The door opened and Emily ran in. Not the quiet, reserved child from school, but a desperate girl who collapsed into Helen's arms, sobbing. They took me from Grandma's house. They said I have to stay here. I don't understand. I want to go home. Please take me home. Helen held her, rocking gently. I know, sweetheart, I know it's scary, but I'm working on fixing this. Grandma said she can't keep me anymore. She said she's sorry. Emily pulled back, tears streaming. Miss Moore, did I do something wrong? Is that why everyone is leaving? No. No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. Then why doesn't anyone want me? The question destroyed Helen. I want you. I want you so much. And in just a few more days, we go to court and the judge will say you can come live with me. Promise? Helen shouldn't promise. There were no guarantees. But looking into Emily's devastated eyes, she whispered, I promise. That night, Helen couldn't sleep. The promise haunted her. What if something went wrong? What if the judge said no? What if... Her phone rang at 2 a.m., the overnight nurse at the center. Mrs. Moore, you need to come now. Emily is gone. Helen's hands shook as she dressed, barely registering what she was putting on. The nurse's voice echoed in her mind. Emily is gone. She called Linda while driving too fast through empty streets. Emily ran away from the facility. They're searching the grounds, but I'm meeting you there, Linda said immediately. The children's center was chaos when Helen arrived. Staff members with flashlights searched the perimeter. Police had been called. The night supervisor, a young woman named Carla, looked devastated. She was in bed at bed check at 10. When we did rounds at midnight, her bed was empty. We found her window jimmied open. In this cold? Helen's heart seized. It was 28 degrees outside. She took her coat and backpack. We've been searching for 2 hours. Police Officer Martinez approached. Mrs. Moore, I understand you're connected to the child. Where would she go? Helen's mind raced. Where would a frightened 6-year-old run? Back to Doris's house. But Doris was already gone. To the school? The school. She loves our school, Helen said urgently. It's where she feels safe. Check Riverside Elementary. It's locked. She's resourceful and small. Check the back entrance, the broken window in the gym we've been reporting for months. Officer Martinez radioed immediately. Within minutes, units were dispatched. Helen followed in her own car, Linda beside her. The school looked haunted in the darkness, its old brick walls and chain-link fence casting strange shadows. Police were already searching when Helen arrived. She ran toward the building, ignoring protests. Emily! Emily! It's Miss Moore! Nothing. Helen circled the building, her breath clouding in the freezing air. Think like a scared child. Where would Emily hide? The greenhouse. The old abandoned greenhouse behind the playground where Helen sometimes took students to look at plants. It was technically off limits, windows broken, door hanging crooked, but children always found it fascinating. Helen ran, stumbling in the darkness. The greenhouse door was ajar. Emily? At first, nothing. Then, a small sound. Crying. Helen pushed inside, using her phone's flashlight. There, in the corner beneath a broken planting table, huddled in her thin coat, clutching her backpack, was Emily. "Oh, sweetheart." Helen rushed over, wrapping the shivering child in her own coat. "I've got you. You're safe." "I didn't know where else to go," Emily sobbed. "I wanted to come to our classroom. I wanted to see my desk. And your desk. And remember when things were normal. I know, baby." Police and paramedics arrived. Emily was checked. Cold but not dangerously so, no injuries. Officer Martinez was kind but firm. "She needs to return to the facility. Protocol." "No!" Emily screamed, clinging to Helen. "Please don't make me go back there. Miss Moore, don't let them take me." Helen held her tight, looking desperately at Linda. "There has to be another way." Linda pulled out her phone, stepping away to make calls. 15 minutes later, she returned. "I got hold of Judge Morrison, the one assigned to your case. He's agreed to an emergency hearing. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. "Tomorrow?" Helen's voice cracked with relief. "He said given the circumstances, the child's distress, the instability, he'll hear your petition immediately." Linda knelt beside Emily. "But tonight, Emily has to go back to the center. Just for one more night. Can you be brave for one more night?" Emily looked at Helen with enormous, terrified eyes. "Will you come get me tomorrow? The moment the judge says yes, I will be there. I promise." The ride back to the center was heartbreaking. Emily clung to Helen until the last possible moment. "You won't forget me?" "Never. Never in a million years." Back home at 4 a.m., Helen found Richard awake and surprisingly lucid. "Where were you?" She told him everything. The whole story, all the pieces. Richard listened, then took her hand. His eyes were clear for the first time in months. "Helen, you're doing something extraordinary. I know I'm a burden. I know I make everything harder, but don't let me stop you from this. That little girl needs you." "Richard, I mean it. Whatever you need to do, do it. I'll manage." He smiled sadly. "I may not remember much anymore, but I remember you always wanted to make a difference. This is your chance." Helen squeezed his hand, tears falling. "Thank you." At 8:30 the next morning, Helen stood outside the courthouse in her best dress, hair neatly pinned, hands trembling. Linda stood beside her. The lawyer, her former student James, carried a briefcase full of documents. "Ready?" Linda asked. Helen thought of Emily, waiting at the center. Thought of all the moments that had led here. 40 years of teaching. A lifetime of almost but not quite making a difference. "Ready," Helen said. The courtroom doors opened. The courtroom was smaller than Helen expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, an American flag in the corner. Judge Morrison sat behind the bench, a man in his 60s with reading glasses perched on his nose, and an expression that gave nothing away. Helen sat at a table with James and Linda. Across the aisle, a representative from Family Services shuffled papers. No Doris, she'd already left Ohio. No Jennifer. She wasn't legally permitted at this hearing yet. Just Helen, advocating for a child who'd already been abandoned too many times. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Morrison reviewed the files before him, his face impassive. Finally, he looked up. "This is an emergency hearing for temporary guardianship. Mrs. Helen Moore petitioning for custody of Emily Rose Carter, age 6. Let's begin." James stood. "Your Honor, my client Helen Moore is a retired educator with 40 years of experience. She has stable housing, adequate financial resources, and most importantly, she has established a meaningful relationship with Emily Carter. The child is currently in crisis. I've read the reports," Judge Morrison interrupted. "The child ran away from a placement facility last night, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor. She ran to the school where Mrs. Moore teaches. She was found by Mrs. Moore, demonstrating the trust and bond between them." The Family Services representative stood. Your Honor, while Mrs. Moore's intentions are admirable, we have concerns. She is 68 years old. She cares for an ex-husband with advanced dementia, taking on a traumatized 6-year-old in addition. I'm aware of Mrs. Moore's situation, the judge said. Mrs. Moore, would you like to address the court? Helen stood, her legs unsteady. Your Honor, I won't pretend this is ideal. I'm not young. I'm not wealthy. My life is complicated. She paused, gathering courage. But Emily Carter is slipping through every crack in a broken system. Her grandmother couldn't manage. Her mother is working toward rehabilitation but isn't ready yet. Her father is institutionalized. That child has no one. She'd have foster placement. She'd have a rotation of strangers. Helen's voice rose with passion. I've taught for 4 decades. I've seen what happens to children who get lost in the system. They stop trusting. They stop hoping. Emily is already on that edge. Judge Morrison studied her. And you believe you can prevent that? I believe I can give her what she desperately needs. Someone who stays. Someone who doesn't leave when things get hard. Helen's voice softened. I may be old, Your Honor, but I have love to give. And time and determination. Isn't that what children need most? The judge was quiet for a long moment. What about the biological mother? Jennifer Carter was released from incarceration. She has rights. James spoke up. Mrs. Carter is supportive of this arrangement, Your Honor. She understands she needs more time before resuming custody. Mrs. Moore would serve as a bridge, providing stability while Mrs. Carter completes rehabilitation. We're proposing supervised visits with gradual transition. A bridge, Judge Morrison repeated, looking at Helen. You understand what you're agreeing to? You'd care for this child, form a deep attachment, and then potentially have to let her go when her mother is ready. Helen's throat tightened. Yes, that's asking a lot of yourself. Emily's already lost everyone. If I can give her even temporary security, it's worth it. The family services representative interjected. Your Honor, we must consider Mrs. Moore's capacity. The ex-husband alone requires significant care. I have full-time nursing support for Richard, Helen countered. I've provided documentation. He has round-the-clock care. That won't change. And if your health fails, if you can't manage, then I'll ask for help. But I won't quit. I don't abandon children. Judge Morrison removed his glasses, rubbing his eyes. Helen could see him weighing everything. Policies, risks, precedents, humanity. This court values family reunification above all else, he began. Jennifer Carter is making progress. The goal should be returning Emily to her mother's care. Helen's heart sank. However, the judge continued, the child's immediate welfare is paramount. She cannot remain in limbo while her mother completes her program. He looked directly at Helen. Mrs. Moore, you're older than typical guardians. Your situation is complicated. But the alternative is placing Emily in foster care, likely with multiple transitions. He picked up his gavel. I'm granting temporary emergency guardianship to Helen Moore for a period of 6 months, with mandatory monthly evaluations. Jennifer Carter will have supervised visitation rights progressing toward reunification if she maintains sobriety and completes required programs. Mrs. Carter. He nodded to the empty chair where Doris should have been. You are relinquishing all guardianship rights as previously filed. He struck the gavel. This court is adjourned. Helen couldn't breathe. James gripped her shoulder. You did it. 6 months, Linda whispered. It's enough time, we'll make it work. But Helen barely heard them. All she could think was, I have to tell Emily. The drive to the children's center felt endless. When Helen walked through the doors, Emily was sitting in the common room, her backpack on her lap, staring at the door like she'd been waiting for hours. When she saw Helen, she stood slowly, afraid to hope. Helen knelt, opening her arms. Come here, sweetheart. Emily ran. Helen caught her, holding her tight. The judge said yes? Emily whispered against Helen's shoulder. The judge said yes. You're coming home with me. Emily pulled back, tears streaming. For real? Not just for a visit? For real, you'll have your own room, your own bed. We'll go to school together every day, and I'll be there when you wake up and when you go to sleep. And you won't leave? Helen cupped the girl's face gently. I won't leave, I promise you I won't leave. Emily buried her face in Helen's coat and cried. deep, wrenching sobs that released months of fear and uncertainty. Helen cried too, for the weight of the promise she'd just made, for the uncertain future ahead, for the little girl who'd been abandoned by everyone she'd ever loved. An hour later, they walked out of the children's center together. Emily held Helen's hand tightly, her backpack over her shoulder. She looked up at the winter sky, gray and heavy with coming snow, and then at Helen. "Miss Moore, you can call me Helen now if you'd like, or whatever feels comfortable." Emily considered. "Can I still call you Miss Moore?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Okay. Miss Moore?" Emily's voice was small. "Do you think my mommy will really come back?" Helen thought of Jennifer, broken but fighting, of the supervised visits ahead, of the complicated path toward healing. "I think your mommy is trying very hard to become someone who can come back, and while she's working on that, you and I are going to build something good together. Okay?" Emily nodded. Then quietly, "I'm scared." "Me too," Helen admitted, "but we'll figure it out together." They drove through the gray December afternoon toward Helen's small house, toward an uncertain future, toward the beginning of something fragile and precious and terrifying. As they pulled into the driveway, Emily looked at the house, modest, a bit worn, but with lights on in the windows. Warm, waiting. "Is this home now?" Emily asked. Helen turned off the car. "This is home now." 3 months later, on a cold March afternoon, Helen stood at her kitchen window watching Emily in the backyard. The girl crouched near the garden bed, mittened hands digging carefully around the first green shoots of spring bulbs they'd planted together in November. "Look, Miss Moore," Emily called through the window. "The tulips are coming up just like you said." Helen smiled, her heart full in ways she'd forgotten were possible. The first weeks had been harder than she'd imagined. Emily had nightmares almost every night, waking up screaming, convinced she'd been abandoned again. Helen would rush to her room, hold her until the trembling stopped, whisper reassurances until dawn. There were meltdowns over small things. A broken crayon, a misplaced toy. Emily's trauma surfaced in unexpected ways, and Helen learned that patience wasn't just important. It was everything. Richard had good days and bad days. On good days, he smiled at Emily and called her the little one. On bad days, he didn't recognize either of them. Emily learned to give him space during those times, understanding in her gentle way that Mr. Richard's brain is tired today. The supervised visits with Jennifer started in January, once every 2 weeks at a neutral facility with a social worker present. The first meeting was awkward and painful. Emily had stared at her mother, this thin, nervous woman with sad eyes, and whispered, "You don't look like the magazine." Jennifer had knelt, tears streaming. "No, baby. That was a long time ago. A different person. Where were you?" "I was sick, and I had to go away to get better, but I'm better now. I'm trying to be better." Emily had turned to Helen. "Is she telling the truth?" And Helen, caught between protecting Emily and supporting Jennifer's redemption, had said carefully, "I think she's trying very hard to tell the truth, and trying is brave." By the third visit, Emily let Jennifer hold her hand. By the fifth, she showed Jennifer drawings she'd made. Small steps. Fragile bridges being built between a mother and daughter who'd lost years to bad choices and worse circumstances. Helen never tried to replace Jennifer. She was careful to call her your mommy when they talked about her, to honor the visits, to encourage the connection even when it was hard to share, because this wasn't about Helen. It had never been about Helen. In February, Helen officially retired from teaching. Her last day was bittersweet. 40 years of chalkboards and phonics and scraped knees and Christmas pageants, all ending. But as she packed her desk, Emily beside her organizing crayons, Helen realized she wasn't leaving teaching behind. She was just teaching one student now, the one who needed her most. March brought evaluation hearings. The social worker visited monthly, documenting Emily's progress. She was thriving, gaining weight, sleeping better, reading at grade level. Her teacher reported increased confidence and engagement. Helen's health held steady. She was tired, yes. Her knees ached. Some days she felt every one of her 68 years. But she managed. With the nurses helping with Richard, with Linda checking in weekly, with her former colleagues bringing casseroles and babysitting offers, she managed. At the March hearing, Judge Morrison reviewed the reports. Mrs. Moore, you've exceeded expectations. Emily is flourishing in your care. Thank you, Your Honor. However, I must address the elephant in the room. He looked at Jennifer, who sat nervously in the back. Mrs. Carter, you've completed your rehabilitation program. You've maintained sobriety for 8 months. You're employed full-time and living in stable housing. The court recognizes your efforts. Jennifer stood. Your Honor, I want to be Emily's mother again. I want to earn back what I lost. And you may get that chance. He turned back to Helen. Mrs. Moore, the original plan was 6 months. We're approaching that deadline. I'm extending your guardianship for another 6 months, but with increased visitation for Mrs. Carter. Unsupervised visits will begin next month. Weekend visits by summer. The goal remains reunification. Helen had known this was coming. Still, hearing it felt like a door closing. That evening, she sat with Emily on the back porch while Richard napped inside. The spring air was fresh, hopeful. Emily, you know your mommy is getting better, right? The girl nodded, picking at her shoelace. And you know that someday, not right now, but someday, you might go live with her again. Emily's face crumpled. But I don't want to leave you. Oh, sweetheart. Helen pulled her close. Loving your mommy doesn't mean you stop loving me. And loving me doesn't mean you can't love her. Hearts are big enough for lots of people. But what if she goes away again? That's a scary thought. But people can change. Your mommy is working really hard to be someone different than she was before. Do you think she will be? Helen chose her words carefully. I think she loves you very much. And I think love makes people want to be better. We have to give her the chance to prove it. Emily was quiet for a long time. Then, if I go live with mommy, can I still visit you? Always. For as long as you want. Even when I'm old? Helen laughed through tears. Even when you're old. In April, Jennifer had her first unsupervised visit. She took Emily to the park, then to lunch. When she brought Emily back, Helen saw the joy and terror on Jennifer's face. She's amazing, Jennifer whispered. I can't believe she's mine. She's amazing because she's strong, Helen replied. And she's strong because she survived. Don't forget that. I won't mess this up again, I swear. Then don't. Because she can't survive being abandoned again. None of us can. They stood there, 2 women who loved the same child, connected by hope and fear and the fragile possibility of redemption. By late May, Emily was spending every Saturday with Jennifer. She came home with stories about baking cookies, visiting the library, meeting Jennifer's sponsor from recovery meetings. The walls between them were crumbling. One Sunday, Emily asked Helen, "Do you think Mommy could come here? To see the tulips we planted?" Of course she can. When Jennifer arrived, Emily grabbed her hand and pulled her to the garden. Look, Miss Moore and I planted these. The yellow ones are my favorite. Helen watched from the porch as Emily chattered excitedly, showing her mother everything. The bird feeder they'd built, the painted rocks marking the vegetable patch, the small wooden sign that said Emily's Garden. Jennifer looked up, catching Helen's eye. She mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Helen nodded. This was the harvest she'd planted months ago, not keeping Emily forever, but giving her roots strong enough to weather whatever came next. In early June, Richard passed away peacefully in his sleep. Helen found him in the morning, looking more at peace than he'd been in years. The funeral was small. A few old friends, the nurses who'd cared for him, Linda and Sharon. Emily held Helen's hand throughout the service. Are you sad, Miss Moore? Yes, sweetheart, but also relieved. He's not confused anymore. He's not in pain. Like he's finally resting? Exactly like that. After Richard's death, Helen's house felt different. Quieter, less burdened. She could breathe more fully. At the 6-month evaluation in late June, Judge Morrison made his decision. Mrs. Carter has demonstrated consistent progress. Emily has responded positively to increased visitation. I'm authorizing a transition plan. By September, Emily will return to her mother's primary custody, with Mrs. Moore retaining visitation rights and serving as an approved secondary guardian. Emily cried when Helen told her, But I don't want to leave. I know it's scary, but your mommy is ready now, and I'll still see you all the time. Wednesdays after school, every other weekend, holidays, I'm not going anywhere. Promise? I promise. The transition happened slowly. July brought overnight visits. August brought full weeks. By the time school started in September, Emily lived primarily with Jennifer in a small apartment across town, but she came to Helen's every Wednesday for dinner and homework. On the first Wednesday, Emily burst through the door with a backpack full of stories. "Miss Moore, I got a new teacher and she's nice, but not as nice as you, and Mommy let me pick my own clothes this morning, and I made a new friend named Sophia and—" Helen laughed, pulling her into a hug. "Slow down. Tell me everything." They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Helen had once sat alone, exhausted and purposeless, and Emily talked for an hour straight, about school, about her room at Jennifer's apartment, about weekend visits to see her father, who was doing better in a new facility. "Miss Moore," Emily said as Helen tucked her into bed that night. She always slept over on Wednesdays. "You know what?" "What, sweetheart?" "I think I have two homes now. Mommy's home and your home. Is that okay?" Helen's eyes filled. "That's more than okay, that's beautiful. And I think I'm lucky, because lots of kids only have one person who loves them, but I have two. You have so many people who love you," Helen corrected gently. "Your mommy, me, your grandma Doris, even far away. Your daddy, even when he's confused. And you know what else?" "What?" "You taught me something important. You taught me that it's never too late to make a difference. And that families aren't just about who you're born to. They're about who stays." Emily smiled sleepily. "You stayed. I stayed. And I always will." As Helen turned off the light, she looked at the drawing still taped to the wall, the one Emily had made months ago with the rainbow and three figures holding hands. She'd spent 40 years teaching children and wondering if any of it mattered. Now she knew. It mattered because one child had needed someone to stay, and Helen had chosen to stay. Not perfectly, not without fear or struggle, but she'd stayed. And in staying, she'd saved them both. Outside, spring had given way to summer, and summer was yielding to fall. The garden Emily had planted would bloom again next year. The tulips would return, and so would Emily, every Wednesday, every other weekend for years to come. Because love, real love, doesn't end when circumstances change. It adapts. It grows. It finds a way. Helen Moore had spent 68 years learning that lesson. And a 6-year-old girl with tangled blonde hair and eyes too old for her face had been the one to finally teach it to her.